All right. So welcome everybody to another episode of what are we talking about, Marty?
Well, we've got some great topics today, including the principle of continuity and also the principles of similarities and complementarities. And we were just having a chat, and you were talking about the various modern generations and continuity. Do you think you could recreate what you just said, because it was beautiful?
Yeah. Thank you. So welcome everybody to this episode of the Six Star Business Chat with Marty and Steve. And Av's in the background. She's not feeling 100% at the moment. She's got sick kids, so she's soldiering on in the background. So what I was talking about, what one of the things that we're going to hopefully talk to you about today is the what are we talking about? How we compare ourselves with each other. And that sort of got me thinking about, I'm doing some research at the moment about intergenerational transition of businesses, the people selling their businesses. And the majority of the businesses that will be coming for sale are baby boomers, the generation behind them, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, millennials, Gen A, and I'm going, why do we have, and the reason I'm a boomer is because I was born post-war. And then we had the technological revolution, which caused a whole bunch of things. We had urban sprawl. So there's a whole bunch of reasons for us. I can understand why that, but when you compare it to, if I was to compare it to the Australian First Nations people, they don't talk about that generation. They talk about their culture. So I was wondering whether, and if you think about Western Europe, where, we probably see civilization as our modern day civilization, the Persians and the Romans and the Greeks and then the English and French, etc. How does that differ from where you are at the moment? And fantastic. We'll that's the roof of where Marty is staying in Peru. So she's actually going back and doing some. Get you to explain what you're doing there. But yeah, so that's a sort of it wasn't as poetic and profound as my first statement when we're off air, but
but it's really important, and all these things that we've highlighted for today, they're all related. Let me talk about this brilliant observation you have about the modern generations, and each one defines itself and isolates as I'm this and not that. If we go way back to the early indigenous cultures, the Aboriginals in Australia, other original human cultures, that's my favorite phrase, because indigenous is our word for them, and we should probably do something different. Anyway, humans, what we started off with was belonging to the land. The land, literally, Mother Earth, Pachamama, we say in South America, spoke everything into being. All of nature, the people, everything that lives on the planet's belly is spoken into being by the life systems that the planet is comprised of. And so we used to have culture based in belonging, number one. And so people knew the land where they belonged. And of course, we had to wander for a few millennia. We were quite the migrators in our earliest years, but then we began to settle. And as we settled, we knew the land we came from. And so that's why you find you talk to the elders in most cultures, if you can have a conversation with them, they will talk about the lineage, but they talk about it in terms of belonging. And when we get to Western culture, we talk about the Romans and their long-lived culture. I'm using that word very loosely. We're talking about belonging not to the land, but to a rulership. Yeah, and so we belong to a people. I'm Roman and not something else, but the continuity then came through power, imposed power. So they were still belonging, but it was held together by power. Yeah, and in modern times, we become very globalized, so that's one problem. People move everywhere and they don't really know what land they come from anymore. That's one of the things I have people work with when they work with me, is they have to remember literally the geography of the place they were born and start to realize that they are of that land. But we don't have that in the modern world. And we're very fractured when it comes to power and government and politics, and that's not holding us together so well anymore. And so the thing about humans is that we're collective. We need belonging. We really do. As much as we've over individuated, we ultimately need to belong. And so the generations are making themselves unique and distinguishable. They're finding a kind of collective identity that distinguishes them primarily from other things they don't like. Because we've also fallen into, in the Western world, a lot of negatives. So it goes from the land to culture held by power to doing the best we can, which is pretty fractured. That's a very short answer to that question.
But that modern culture, loosely, right, has been around for a couple of thousand years.
Right.
So is it a runaway cart that we have lost control of and just allowed, have we just followed the lemmings don't jump off cliffs, by the way, so I'm not going to disparage lemmings, but the friend of the lemmings, yeah. But the image of people saying, lemmings running off the cliff. So we just follow each other blindly, without regard for what was before.
Yeah.
Has the horse bolted? And it's like, now we are dealing with this monumental problem, and we are trying to solve it with the solutions of the past, which we know intuitively makes sense. But how do we reconcile that with the fear, and I'll use the word fear, of losing what we have now? Because it's like, well, if I go down that path, what am I, I don't know that path. So I can see it's a massive dilemma that once people are aware of this and they go, right, I'd love to go down that track. But,
this is really big. I'm so proud of us for diving into big topics in 30 minutes at a time.
I think we're crazy.
So you said something a few minutes ago, the runaway cart. In a sense, yes, it's a runaway cart, because by the time we get to the Romans reaching the culmination of their power and all starts to fall apart. I'm not a history buff, so I'm not sure the exact sequence of things. But during the time, as Western culture grew up through the Romans, and the Roman armies marched north and were claiming lands, and one of the things that happened was that the Romans were, I think, among the first of the explorers and conquerors to destroy indigenous healers and elders and the wisdom books. And I'm not sure when the first witches got burned at the stake in the Inquisition, but we started to destroy the original wisdom, and so we had no continuity. And so we didn't know where we came from, so we had to reinvent. We had to reinvent some history, some claim to a history. So if I'm going to step into power, I have to say I came from XYZ, so that's why I have power over all of you people. But we didn't maintain what we already knew in a good sense. We started to chop our roots off, and every time we chopped the roots off, the tree fell, so we had to invent some new roots and pretend there was a tree. And it is a runaway cart. It really is. And this is a really huge topic, so I'm going to try it in a nutshell. we were starting on a road toward a different kind of consciousness. We were starting to think and reason and live in causality. If I move my armies here, then XYZ. If I use an assembly line instead of the old craftsman's way, then XYZ. Everything became based in causality. And that level of human consciousness only operates in a certain way. And if you're in that level of consciousness where you have to own what you're doing, it's your idea, you claim it, you copyright it, you go from A to B to C. The only way you are processing information is A or B. And so now if you come across a choice point, oh, I kind of like that path, but I don't know what it is, so I can't do that. So I'm going to go this way. It's just because we've squished our consciousness down to such a tiny, thin layer that we don't have access to our incredible creative processing capacity anymore. Plus, we don't remember where we came from. So I have to constantly create my little kingdom and declare that I'm the queen or the king of it and set out all the rules again and say only A and not B. And that will fail. It always fails. If you put power at the top and weakness at the bottom, your tower's going to fall. So we just kept doing that because we forgot the original wisdom. We forgot where we came from and what our job description is in the big system of life. And it's really hard to see if you've got blinders on.
So like you, I'm not a historian, but I'm the bush lawyer of historians, because there's a couple of people who I follow and they are unbelievable historians. A lot of what I've heard, and this is my interpretation of it, a lot of that chopping off, the burning witches at the stake was based on power, but it was underscored by a form of belief. And, the pagans believed in multiple gods, and eventually what we've done is it's almost like now it's a tripartite of beliefs, isn't it? It's like you're either a Christian, a Muslim, maybe Hindu, Buddhist, we put them in another quadrant, or an atheist or an agnostic, So is it, and I don't want to get political on this, but is it because we have a particular religious belief that is binary then? You have to be this or that. Like I have to be a Christian or agnostic or an atheist or something. So I'm labeling myself, which sort of comes back to the original question: is why are we comparing ourselves? What's the purpose of comparing ourselves to other people? How does it serve us? Because
it doesn't. It does.
Yeah, that's what my interpretation is.
Yeah.
It doesn't serve us. But why?
Well, it comes down to how we're using awareness. This is my calling cry in life. If you have limited the use of your awareness, if you've been taught to use your awareness in a limited way, there's a certain level of human consciousness, the way we process information, that only does A or B. It has a function as long as it's in conversation with the rest of our intelligence, which is huge and relational and creative. But most people only put their awareness in this small part of our processing system, if you will. So they only understand A or B, me or you. And most people don't understand that all of the great traditions, even the versions that we now call religion, they all know the same thing and they all teach the same thing and they all love the same way. And the idea of spirit, creator, whatever you call it, it's all the same underneath all of those traditions. It's the same thing. And we're fighting over it. I mean, I think it's the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, where three religions, I call them wisdom traditions. I don't like the word religion so much, but three different expressions of one creator. Why not multiple expressions? What do flowers do in the wild? what do my sweet peas do in the garden? Every year, different colors. Oh my God, nature does that. So it's only because of the way we're using awareness. And any other argument, intellectual, historical, yada, yada, is pointless. Because you can't find a why. It's just how we're using awareness. There are other ways to know the world and be known by the world.
So what's coming up for me is it's almost like we the human race, because when we compare ourselves internally, so let's not compare ourselves with other humans, let's compare ourselves with nature and the animal kingdom, right? They don't go through this cognitive, it's more about their how they were brought into the world, whether they're a lion or a sheep, or so they have a particular tradition that they have, that they the parent hands to the cub or whatever, whereas we process all of this, right? So we've got a brain that's processing it, and it takes a lot of energy to process it. We know that through the neuroscience. You're an expert in this space. So are we just trying to simplify things down to make it easy for us? Because it's much easier to go, A or B, right? Much easier to do that than the experimenting. I'm thinking, right? So I love being debunked by you, Marti. Is it easier to be experimental, to be creative, to allow that to flow over you, as opposed to I got to go this way or that way?
It depends. It's sort of yes and no to your question. If I know where I come from, if I've got a taproot into the earth, if I know I've got a source that supports me and gives me energy every day, if I know I'm hooked in, wired into a bigger system that's holding me and supporting me in some way, it's much easier to be creative. It's much easier to walk into the unknown every moment, no resistance at all. But if I don't have that grounding and it's just up to me, it's me or them, I'm going to be terrified. My limbic fear circuit is going to trigger all the time. I cannot, in that state, I can't process lots of input. I'll have to shut it out. And in that state, it's easier to say one thing and one thing only. The rest of you get away from me.
So it feels like that's a disconnection, and so what we've done is we've disconnected from initially from the earth, right? So our source, as you put it, and then that then manifests itself through disconnection with other people, and so we tend to, because we've been disconnected, and because we want to belong, then we get together in groups and huddles, right, and to support each other, and then that becomes an echo chamber, because then I'm only going to be talking about what my beliefs and all the rest of it, and then does that then mean that there is that means it closes down the opportunity for me to be open to different ways of things. Have I paraphrased that correctly?
Paraphrase, yeah. And the opportunity is still there. It's just that we've closed ourselves to a degree that we can't see it anymore. We don't know it. Yeah. And, part of this is, you mentioned the beauty of species in nature. They know who they are. They know where they came from. The parents know exactly how to raise a successful little one, and the species go on. But with humans, in most indigenous cultures, you'll find a story that says when Creator, whoever that is, created humans, the first iteration of us apparently wasn't so good. And there are so many creation stories that say, Huitzilopochtli looked down on the land and said, oh my God, that was a mistake. And he wiped out the first iteration of humans and tried again. There's a story in North America, I think it's from the Lakota Sioux, but I'm not sure. But Wankantanka, Creator, has made the earth and nature and all the animals, and it's just a beautiful planet. And then he took a stab at making the bipeds, the people, right? And he plunked them down. And they wandered around and destroyed things, and they were kind of useless. And the animals were complaining to Wankantanka, like, what are you going to do? So, every animal knows what it is and what its job is and its place in nature. And the humans just didn't know anything. They didn't have a job description. And so Wankantanka calls all the animals together and he says, we got to give these bipeds a job. And I want ideas from you. And I have to tell you, this is creator speaking. He says, my idea is I placed 4 directions in your world, but I want to place a 5th one. And I don't know where to put it. So that might be their job. Maybe if I hide it somewhere, they could find it. But that's just an idea. And so he asked all the animals for their input. And they like the idea of humans' job is to find the 5th direction. And they just don't know where it is. And there's all these suggestions, and Buffalo says put it in the plains, and the Bobcat says they're going to drive wagons over the plains and they'll find it too easily. And somebody else has put it in the Rockies. No, they're going to cross the mountains, and on until finally a tiny little mole raises his hand and says, Wankantanka, oh great one, I have an idea. And of course, moles, they don't see very well with their eyes. They see inwardly. And so the mole says to Wankantanka, I think you should put the 5th direction in the human heart center, in the human heart, because that's the last place they'll look for it. In other words, it will keep them busy. Yeah.
It's so true though, isn't it? It's sad. It really is sad.
Yeah. It's very sad.
Just, so Marti, we want to leave with, this is such a beautiful conversation we have every week. I do too. We almost pulled the pin on this because of technical issues, and I'm going, I hope not, because I really do cherish these conversations, and I hope the people who are viewing this get some value from it as well. It's not just us doing. So the reason we're doing this is to try and spread your word and the word about how we can be better at what we do. We're under the auspices of the 6-Star Business that Av's championing. So I just thought of then, if you were to connect with we talked about disconnection, right? About being disconnected from the earth. We've talked about, connecting to the earth and, the practice of going outside, and, that's, it's not as simple as that, but go back and listen to the previous versions and you get a little bit more. But if 2 people came together, what would be a practice that would enable them to be connected and to in some way find their heart?
So 2 people for friendship or business? Do you have a...
Let's start with friendship.
Yeah. Disclosure. And there's a principle in the Andes. It's a 3-part principle, the energetics of relationships. And the first part is 2 people come together. You don't overwhelm the other person with hugs, and don't move in too fast. Have some conversations and talk about yourself and share yourself with the other person and listen to the other person. Just meet a little bit. And if it feels good, the next time you get together, be a little closer and share some things that are important to you. Share some things that are challenges to you. Open your heart a little bit more. And if that feels good, the 3rd meeting, you have a really big hug and you exchange some real energy. But basically, it's the principle of disclosure that brings people together.
I love that. I've just been thinking of, we talk about we need to be vulnerable, vulnerability. I actually looked at the definition of vulnerable, and I was wondering, like that, we were talking about this 30 years ago in management. You need to be open, emotional intelligence, all the rest of it. We're just not. People are not. And I looked at the definition of vulnerability, and it's basically in fear of being attacked.
Yeah.
So when
I don't like.
No. So I started. I've just written something about being valiant. because valiant is, is based on courage. Now, valiant doesn't necessarily mean that you succeed. It could end up in a success or not, or a failure. But it's valiantly, it's courageous. Yeah. So I wonder whether the subconscious is when we hear the word vulnerable, we subconsciously feel fear. And so therefore, no, I'm not going to do that. And I wonder whether the management consultants or the books that have been written over the last 30, 40 years have just missed the mark on a very simple principle.
Absolutely. And they're not listening to you and me, Steve. Really, seriously, the word vulnerable hits the wrong ping in the Western brain. And people literally say, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
But disclosure is different. Disclosure, it requires the listener to receive, to accept without any blame or judgment. Yeah. And so in the process of disclosure in Indigenous cultures, you open your heart, you reveal something very true about you, and the other people simply have to receive it. No agenda, no judgment, no nothing. You just receive it and feel it. Now, it's easier to do that if you've got your feet on the ground. Yeah. And so another thing that I would say, two people coming together or in business, what's the common ground? What do both parties or all parties belong to? Find some common ground, literally. Yeah, literally. Maybe stand in the business park with your shoes off or something, or two people coming together. There is common ground, and I don't mean psychologically.
You mean physical? You mean physical ground?
I mean the physical ground. Talk about where you were born. Talk about that geography. I was born on the banks of the Mississippi River, and so river runs through me completely. And I'd love to know where other people are born. I love to know that geography because it's imprinted in them. Share that.
Wow.
So it's very powerful.
Wow. All right. Such a good session. I got chills, really do, because it's just like there's pennies dropping, like there's little crumbs of that I'm following this trail, and so thank you. I'm really grateful for your wisdom. So thank you very much. Now we do each time we try and come up with a topic for the next session. Have you been inspired to think of something?
Well, I'm always inspired by what we're already talking about. And one of the things I'm very interested in is the sort of migratory nature of modern people and this issue of where do we come from. And I don't know if there's an equivalent or something that pings in the business world for you as you talk to business leaders. I think we have this issue of belonging every time we make a move. Where do I come from? Who am I? If I'm confident in who I am, where I've come from, then I don't have to worry about myself, and I can move into communication openly, and I can be fully present. But if I'm worried about where I come from, I might have to defend myself at any moment. If you bring two people together who aren't fully present, you're not going to get a good outcome.
That's very interesting because, I'm sure in America, across the world, their cities have a particular persona about them. So in Australia, you have Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, Eastern Seaboard. Canberra is the capital, but if we talk about, the commercial centres of so Sydney and Melbourne, there's this rivalry between them as to which one. Melbourne was our first parliament, right? So it's where the capital was, and then it moved to Canberra. But Sydney has been the transient. It's where where Australia was founded with the white guy standard. No, I'm talking white, right? I'm not talking Indigenous. And then Brisbane has this, sort of smaller cousin thing. I was born in Sydney. When people came to Sydney from other from other places. It was a stepping stone to somewhere, right?
Mhm.
Unless you were an indigenous of Sydney, right? So you're born and bred.
Mhm.
Because I'm from
Yeah.
Sydney, one of the things I can say, best part about Sydney is leaving, right?
Yeah.
Sorry to all our Sydney listeners, but
Yeah.
but and when I went to Brisbane, when I lived in Brisbane, it was really hard to break down the barriers because it was the old school, it was the
Yeah.
school tie. So if you went to Brisbane Grammar,
Yeah.
you made
Yeah.
it in business, it was almost
Mhm.
that. So how do we bring that as a subject? Are we talking about
Mhm.
what are we saying here?
Well, what I'm saying, and I've got a couple ideas here. What I'm saying, number one, is when you ask a Western person where they're from, they'll name a city.
Mm-hmm.
They won't name a geography.
Right.
Even under Sydney, even under Manhattan, Los Angeles, there's earth. And the formation of the geology, the geography underneath all the concrete and steel we piled on top, the wisdom of the earth is there. And that wisdom is in every person who's born in that spot.
Great.
And
all right.
There's all kinds of stuff. There's underwater aquifers and volcanic pools of molten stuff and faults and different kinds of rock and crystal caves and rivers, and oh my God, it's just so much. So we're not even talking about human qualities if we want to find out where somebody comes from. We want
Wonderful.
the earth underneath, and that changes people.
The wisdom of the earth.
Yeah.
All right.
And and I also think, just to put this in, that for you and me, a cool thing to explore would be to find some equivalent thing for people in business.
Mm.
But there's businesses coming together to create a new kind of whatever, or a business leader like you work with who's going to start a new phase. They have to know who they are and where they came from in order to move on confidently.
The connection of business. Okay. Wonderful. Marti, we are at the bottom of the hour. So, and Av needs to go back to sleep. She's soldiered on. She soldiered on in the background here.
Feel better soon. Oh my God.
Yeah. So
wonderful as always,
right.
Steve. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll wait for Av to hit the pause button on the live stream. So we can, I don't know, what do we do?
We'll just chat a little bit.
We'll chattel on here.
Yeah.
Because I am watching on my phone. We are still live, so
okay.
Don't say anything.
The other thing, if we're still live, the other topic we need to talk about soon is the topic of love. We really need to. It's a very, very big topic in consciousness. It's part of the technologies of consciousness. And I've had elders here in South America say to my group very recently, you Western people, you've forgotten love.
You stopped streaming.
Oh, that was something to stop on, wasn't it?
Oh no, I stopped before. Sorry.
Oh, you did? Okay.
When you said I've to stop the button. Yeah.
Oh, Av, get better soon. Oh my God, I feel.
I'm fine, Marti. It's not. I'm not sick. It's just my kids.
Okay. Oh.
Yeah.
God. Well, sending love and power anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Did we lose Steve?
No, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay. I lost your picture. All right.
That was great. But I mean, love in the boardroom was lost, many
if it ever was there. Yeah. But as a principle of consciousness, it's not what most people think. It's even more glorious.
Yeah. Av, if you wanted to go to sleep, I've got the con, so you can leave.
Cool. Just send me the text of the next topic, right?
Yeah, we'll do.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
All right. See ya.
Yeah. Oh, poor baby.
Hmm. Um, as I said, I've been doing some research, and that the whole Keynesian approach to society, where it's believed that if the government gets involved, it can support society. So, less capitalistic views, so more socialistic views. But the consequence of that, and I don't know, I haven't done enough research into this. It's only just that, I'm sort of looking at that, and I'm tapping into my intuition and going, well, what's the problem with that? It is that it feels supported, so that you've got a safety net continually underneath you. Now, my parents grew up post-war. My mother was very sick here in Australia. There was no Medicare. So, we paid, my mother had 10 operations in 10 years with surgeons, right?
Whoa.
And this was, this was, they were expensive. And even though they were kind to us with their, and generous in reducing the cost, but there's still was cost. And, so Dad brought 4 kids up, and with a sick wife, and, all of that. Now, if we, I'm very grateful for the politicians here who brought in Medicare, because it enabled me to live a different life. But it's also it's also become this society where we feel as though it's a right, not a privilege now. That's
It's so huge. It's, I think about the Inca culture, and they were the last of thousands of years of very, very successful cultures, but we have the clearest record of them. And they just took everything that the previous cultures knew and incorporated it. But what they did was their way of ruling. The Inca man had a queen wife, and the two of them ruled together. Equal power, different job descriptions. And they had a very extraordinary, highly directed organization of, like, most of South America. And they built a road, the longest road in the world, in 1/10 the time it took Romans to build their long road. They had 20 years of stores of food, 20 years worth for everyone in the kingdom. And they kept it fresh. They knew how to freeze dry. It was really something. But, and there are all these amazing stories. But the thing is that scale is something that humans have never figured out. Is there are more humans now than there have ever been. We take up way too much biomass. And communicating to that many people who are living in that many different circumstances, we don't do very well. We start to generalize at too high a level, and so the lower ranks don't get reached, and dissent happens, and splitting happens, and we can't design a program for that many different parts of the system if we don't know that many different parts exist. And so part of this is an issue of scale. And then we would need to raise our children and teach them from the get-go that it's not something you can expect that you have to earn and contribute. That's another principle of consciousness, is how you're investing in the entire system. So there's a multiplicity of return for every part of the system, every person involved. And we've never figured that out either, because as there are more and more people, we just get more splintered. And so that's where that annuity hits.
And when people, so you've been doing this for a long time, when are people just, it's a bit like, I'm coming back to the religious thing. When if you don't believe in me, you're wrong, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's power based, but is it also fear based? is that people, really, yes, and that makes sense. But I'm going to shout you down because I'm frightened that I might have to go down that pathway. It's easier for me to it's easier for me to attack you, and because you're a minority, to sort of disparage it. It's like if you were to be really cruel, you would go, you're barbarians and savages, right? Look where you live, in a teepee or in a hut, or you don't even have a house. How can you say that you have a better life when when sickness is ravaging through your thing? The sickness that we brought to you, by the way, the smallpox and the plague and all that sort of thing. We killed you, but we're blaming you because you're dying. We forget about that, right? we don't bring that up, right?
We don't bring. Because we can't see it, because we're sitting in that tiny level of consciousness that has A or B. And the thing is that the people in power now are living in that tiny level of consciousness. They can only see A or B. And so the source of all this is how people are using awareness. If you live in that tiny layer of consciousness, you're living basically in sympathetic dominance. So your fear circuit is on all the time. And the fear circuit is only looking for stuff it already knows is safe. It's looking for same. Okay, I'm safe, so we can have it. I've deemed that's dangerous, so push it away. But it's not judging good or bad. The limbic fear circuit judges charge, literally the amounts of electrical charge. And so someone could really, really love you, but if you're too steeped in your sympathetic dominance, you would push love away, because the limbic fear circuit says that's too much energy, it's dangerous. And so the people in power mostly are in this very limited level of consciousness, and there's no logical argument in the world that changes that. It has to be a completely different approach, completely different kinds of people in office. But we've been on this road of power at the top for so long that it strikes me when we started building things. We were just beautiful when we built the first buildings. Humans made these structures in order to track things like the sun's path across their land. So we built our structures to enhance our relationship with nature. And then we built our to house the Roman Senate, to house governance. And then we put more stone down to cover the earth. And then we built more houses to protect us from the weather, so we no longer knew the weathers, and so on. And the more we built, the more hierarchical we got, because we started to control nature and control our environments. And when we get into that control, we're slipping into sympathetic dominance and either or, and power has to be on the top, because we're less and less capable of accepting what is moment to moment. And we start to believe that we are supposed to control everything. And we've been living in that state for 2020 some years, at least.
I've got this crazy theory, because I look around and I go, this is just not natural. Like what I'm sitting in here now, what I'm doing is just not natural. And I'm going, we're probably aliens. We're probably something that's dropped in, and to be really crude, we did something with animals that, we landed, we did something with animals, turned out, look, hey, this is us, Homo sapien, here we are.
Well, and it's a likelihood.
Well, I can't, okay, Darwin has got his theories and all, where we came from and the fish out of the sea and all the rest of it. But there's a piece missing here somewhere, and we won't know it until they return and go, I left you here to do good. What the fuck have you done?
Yeah, really.
So anyway, we won't be here in 100 years, because the AI bots will have wiped us out, and they're not going to.
They won't even come back for us if they see that.
Well, the bots are not going to destroy the planet. You know, they won't need the
No,
planet to live. Anyway,
exactly.
you know,
Yeah.
I had another crazy thought. You know, we should continue recording. So stop the live stream, continue recording, because this is the bonus feature for the
Yeah.
subscribers.
I think so. I think we should do that.
All right, wonderful. Marty, I do need to go. I'm going to go and make a living in this horrible world. No, I shouldn't say that.
Oh,
I got,
no. Well, I know exactly what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. But thank you for your time today. It's always wonderful to be with you.
Me too. All right. Safe travels.
Love it. All right. Thanks so much.
Wait to hear the stories.
I'll have lots of them.
I'm sure.
All right.